Hey guys, welcome back, it's Ripe again. In today's video, my neighbor's ridiculously entitled brat set my property on fire and then he claimed that they are innocent. Here is what happened, let's dive right into the story. The first one starts like this. I'm pretty sure that everyone at some point has had a neighbor on the street who is just an absolute mess. Sure, they are nice people when you talk to them, but as soon as you see their kids, you cannot help but wonder how they managed this far as parents. I was unfortunate enough to actually live next door to the den of 3 incredibly destructive and evil children, 2 girls and a boy. The eldest was a girl of 10, her sister was 8 and their little brother was 4. I had a daughter who was roughly the same age as the girls, and with the fact that my wife was close friends with the mother, they had playdates all the time. Whenever they came over, me and the wife would rush around like crazy, hiding all the breakable stuff, and when they left, we discreetly checked their pockets to make sure they were not running off with toys that were not theirs. After each playdate, you could almost guarantee that one of my daughter's toys would be broken. For instance, my daughter got the idea that she wanted to be a drummer girl, so we got her a little drum set, nothing expensive, just something she could drum on and see if she was keen on it, but she wasn't. But when the neighbor's kids came over, I swear they beat the living hell out of that drum set to the point that they broke the mountings for 2 of the drums. That is how hard they would hit them with the stick. They kept jumping on the bass pedal to the point the spring broke free and they squashed the seat. It was a nightmare and I really started to dislike them, especially when I started to get insights into how the parents treated their kids and felt it no wonder that they acted up as they did. There was no discipline in the house and I cannot help but think it was because the mother was too lazy to get her rear off the couch and the father, who was clearly at his wits' end all the time, did nothing but run away from the problem. I swear, anytime they did anything naughty, the mother would just yell at them to get on the naughty step, to which they would refuse and carry on with their attitude, and that would go on for a good half hour or so. To which the child would just break down into tears, stomp up to their room and then trash everything. There was one instance where they wouldn't allow their eldest daughter to watch creepy and spooky YouTube videos, being only 10 and all. She threw her tablet onto the floor and stomped on it several times until it was unusable. I thought that was it, this kid is going to get bent over the knee and spanked or something, but nope, the mother ordered the eldest to the naughty step, to which the eldest said some rather nasty words to her own mom and ran off into her garden. The tablet ended up getting replaced by the end of the week. One day I am chilling on their couch during one playdate and the youngest daughter is cuddling up to me, which was fine. They were pretty decent kids when they were behaving themselves, but their youngest, the boy, who was about 2 at the time or so, wants to climb up on the couch to join in the cuddle fest. The youngest girl is not having it and keeps trying to push her brother away. I'm telling her to stop and that he can come and cuddle with us if he wants. She tells me that she doesn't want him near her and I swear to God, starts kicking her brother in the head. These were not gentle love taps or using her feet to push him away, she was proper booting him in the head with shoes on. My instant reaction was to slap her thigh and full on growled at her to stop. I did not slap her thigh hard, but the way my hand was cupped made it sound like quite a slap. There was not a mark or anything. The father gets notably agitated, not because I had slapped his daughter's thigh, but because I had disciplined her. I explained to him that she was kicking her brother in the head, a 2-year-old little boy, right in the dome, right in the most sensitive spot on a toddler, and had to do something to get her to stop. You don't discipline my kids, I discipline my kids. Which is fair, I admit I might have overstepped my boundaries, but I so desperately wanted to tell him that maybe he should actually try to discipline his kids rather than just letting them run wild all the time. But I was done with them anyway. I had just about enough of that family and the terrible influence they were having on my own daughter, who thought she could get away with acting like them now. I certainly stamped that right out before it became a problem and even outright told my daughter that I didn't want her to hang around with those kids next door anymore. She was notably upset, but I explained to her why that is and she understood, and although she still had the odd playdate with them, invites them to her birthday parties, she knows that they are destructive and not to replicate their behavior. So as time went on, the years melted away and my relationship with the neighbors ebbed to estranged, which I was absolutely fine with. We would hear them now and then, the parents shouting at their naughty children and the naughty kids shouting back at their parents. Until one fateful day, while the children were outside playing unsupervised, they did something so destructive even to this day I couldn't believe what had happened. So we were out for the day, and the exact nature of events is a mystery to me, but at some point the neighbor's kids got into my back garden and started playing around with my barbecue. From what the fire investigator told me, it all started when the barbecue was knocked over, which set alight to the awning and eventually my house. That's right, those destructive little kids set fire to my house. I was not happy, I was probably the most pissed I'd ever been. The whole house did not burn down, just the kitchen, lounge and upstairs bathroom, so basically a third of my house. I was lucky it was not more, and from the reports I read, at some point the kids ran to their mom and dad after knocking the lit barbecue over. By the time they came around to the back garden to investigate the damage the kids had caused, the fire was already spreading rapidly. I was fuming, I had enough and decided to press charges to the fullest extent that I could. It took a fair bit of time for the legal proceedings to come to a head, but in the end they were sued for the full extent of the damage, which was about $460,000. That was for the reconstruction work and to replace all the things we lost in the fire. It did not stop there either, because I had taken legal action and there were kids involved, social services made their presence known. I had no direct influence over this, it was simply state procedure, but deep down something in me wanted their neglect exposed, though I was sure that not disciplining your kids was not against the law, otherwise there would be a lot more parents behind bars. Things escalated quickly, and I was surprised to be honest. I remember waking up one morning to the sound of what could only be described as a wailing banshee's cry. I looked out the window to see that there was a cop car and the father was already in the back and the mother was getting her ass dragged away. The kids were standing on the porch with a social worker, having to watch their parents get taken away. I couldn't help but think that was a little too harsh and no doubt was gonna scar those children for the rest of their lives. I later heard that the mother and father got arrested for reckless endangerment and neglect of 3 minors and their children got taken into foster care. I was not in the least bit surprised, and as sad as the situation was, I could not help but feel sorry for whatever poor foster family those kids ended up with. I still expect to pick up the newspaper one morning and read about a foster family with their house burned down while police are on the lookout for 3 demonic children. And now let's move on to the next story. It starts like this. HOA Karen threatened to sue me for removing a hazardous tree from my property. As a customer service representative, I have dealt with all sorts of entitled people. I have also dealt with a lot of Karens, and while this is no fun, it is part of the job and sometimes it makes coming home that much sweeter at the end of a rough day. Except I never thought I would have to be dealing with a Karen at my own home. So I live in a pretty nice neighborhood that is of course an HOA. I am not the biggest fan of HOAs of any kind, and although my HOA has never really given crap about stupid stuff, except that one time they fined me because the paint was chipping off my fence, it is an important part of this story. I was actually surprised when the HOA agreed with me on this one. Our next door neighbor, we will call her Karen, has actually always been lovely with us. Her and my wife frequently chatted when they spotted each other outside. Karen often complimented the large oak tree that was in our driveway. This was 1 out of 7 oak trees we had on our property, and this particular oak tree was the biggest, and the top of it even fanned out into her front yard a little bit. I'm sure they enjoyed the shade it brought their front yard because we really enjoyed the shade it brought to our house as well. However, about a year ago we had to make the tough decision to remove the tree from our property after a pretty bad hurricane season. A tree branch fell off and cracked my wife's windshield. In another incident, the weather was extremely windy one day and a tree branch was slammed up against my son's bedroom window. Although it did not do any damage, I decided that we were not going to wait until it does. Before removing it, we also tried to see if there were any other options. The tree roots themselves were pretty bulky and it was starting to grow under our driveway, tearing the corner of it up a little bit. Besides being a trip hazard, I knew it would only continue to grow. We had called out a team of specialists to see if there was any way we could deal with the big bulky growing roots. Unfortunately, there wasn't, and with the way the tree roots were growing, they would travel towards my neighbor's driveway. The last thing I wanted to do was pay for damage on their property as well. So we decided to remove the tree completely. It really was a beautiful tree, but it was just not worth any of the safety hazards it could have and already brought. Plus, we had 6 more in our backyard that we could enjoy. It cost an arm and a leg to remove it, but I knew if we let it grow, we would be paying even more in damage. I should mention that when we removed it, Karen and her husband were away on vacation. Their 19-year-old daughter was still home. We did not tell them that we were removing it or anything because, well, why would we? Plus, we were not that close, so it did not make sense to call them up and be like, hey, we are removing a tree from our yard. However, the daughter must have had other plans and told her parents that we were removing the tree because several days later, Karen called us. She was actually complaining about us removing our own tree. She was seething and complaining that we could not do this and that we needed a city permit to remove the tree. I told her that no, we didn't. It's not like we were building a carport or something. We were removing a tree from our yard. She then proceeds to tell us that our garden/yard is an eyesore now and she should not have to live next to someone who does not maintain their yard. Karens, if you are mad about something, please just be upfront. I knew the reason this Karen was so upset was because she would be losing a great amount of shade in her driveway and part of her porch that our tree provided. While sure, it must have sucked that she lost the benefit from us having the tree, the keyword here is us. It was our tree and on our property, so she had no right to sit there and complain about it. She could have bought and planted her own tree. Heck, she even could have gotten a nice patio umbrella. Anyways, Karen and her husband returned home a few days later. Karen had no shame coming up and knocking on my door. I did not understand why she was still complaining. Did she think it would bring the tree back? Or that we would plant a new one just because she was upset about it. She had told us that she was going to get the HOA involved or sue us. I was quite tired of dealing with her by now, so I looked her straight in the eye and told her not to bother because I would call them myself. The next day, a few board members of the HOA came out to my house to see what was fully going on. I explained to them the situation and showed them all of the paperwork and how we had licensed experts come out and assess the tree roots. I showed them the damaged part of the driveway from the tree roots just to prove my case. And guess what? They sided with us. Karen was so pissed off, which is still so weird to me. What did she think she was going to accomplish by complaining about what I had removed on my yard? Note to self, Karens are not always clients or customers, sometimes they are your neighbors. And yeah, ripe stars, I guess, the HOA cannot be the real bad boogeyman in every single story as we can see here, however, that is probably really the exception to the rule. Either way, if you still enjoy the stories about Karens and HOAs, then I would really appreciate it if you could post some star emojis in the comments if you want to support my channel. Thank you so much in advance. The next one is titled Neighbors Are Awful. I live in a house with approximately 20 by 20 drive. There are no structural boundaries between my drive and the next door's drive, so you can walk across one onto the next. My neighbors are not the nicest, they are only friendly when they want something and don't care they may do things that annoy their neighbors. In other words, setting fires when you have your washing out, letting their many barking dogs outside at 5:30 AM and driving their van across the front of my drive to get to theirs. The bricks on the corner of my drive are a weak spot with little support. I have asked the neighbors twice to not drive over the corner because it sinks the block paving, but they still do it. They also park their van right next to my border, obstructing light to my living room and using my drive to step out and walk around their vehicles. Last year I noticed my neighbor on the other side of me has built a brick wall between his drive and mine. It is about 2 feet tall, it looks nice. So I contracted the same wall to be built on the other side of my drive to match. This will solve the problem of the neighbor driving over my land and damaging the drive, because the wall goes to the very end of my drive and they will need to avoid it. The petty part is that I have made it 3 feet tall. This is just the right height to be an obstruction, so they cannot open their van doors if they park next to my boundary. They have a lot of vehicles and a small drive like ours. The only place they can put their van is right outside their own living room window, blocking all the light into their house. Let's wait for the fallout. And yeah, Ripe Stars, I'm really curious, if you have ever gotten petty revenge or any other sort of revenge on one of your awful neighbors, then I would really appreciate it if you could share these stories with us in the comments or on r/Ripe Stories on Reddit, where there is a good chance that I might read your story in a future video. The next one is titled When the Service Charge Becomes the Urine A-Hole Charge. I was the server for evening room service at a smallish hotel when I was in my early 20s. Our hotel had a contract with one of the airlines, so we often had their pilots and attendants stay for layovers. They were often a bit of a challenging breed, frequently unfriendly, sometimes outright rude as hell, demanding and painfully stingy, despite the fact that they always got a decent per dime during these layovers. I was always friendly though, because not all of them were crappy and I had to cut them some slack, because being a pilot, or especially a flight attendant, could be a really crappy and draining job most of the time. One evening, a pilot calls down to order something to eat, but first he wants me to itemize out the bill for him over the phone for the items he is ordering, which is not unheard of. Some hotels tack on outrageous surprise fees to bills. I rattle off his items and prices and then, so your food subtotal is $25, plus the $2.25 delivery fee and the 20% service charge. He stops me. My menu says the delivery fee is $2. He was right and I knew it, but my manager had told me to just ignore the discrepancy and always go with whatever the computer said, so I feigned ignorance and gave him a genuine apology for the mistake on the menu. I told him that I wish I could change the fee for him, but unfortunately the system prohibits me from changing fees or prices on the order entry computer. He starts totally flipping out. I told him that I would have the front desk credit 25 cents to his overall bill to cover the charge error, but still he is yelling at me, insisting that we match our charges to the menu and it is fraud and illegal for us to charge him something different than what is printed on the menu. I offered to bring him a quarter out of my own wallet on delivery with my apologies, because I couldn't fix it any other way and I was not even an a-hole when I made that offer, but he would have none of it. He demanded that the computer system charge him everything exactly as it is printed on the menu. He told me to call back when I figured out how to fix it up and hung up. I was talking to the chef about it after the call, and the chef reminded me that our manager had enlisted me to program some new menu items into the computer a while back, and the admin passwords were taped to the monitor on the back office computer that controls our order system software. I was then actually able to go to the office and change the delivery fee to $2. But I also knew that while the menus in the guest rooms listed the delivery charge as $2 when it was really $2.25, it also listed the service charge as 25% when the computer actually only charged 20%. So I changed the service charge to 25% because I would not want to commit fraud after all, right? I called the pilot back, told him I found a solution that corrected the delivery fee. He smugly agrees to letting us make the order for him now. I take the food up to the room and give him his bill. I'm sorry again about the mistake earlier. I made sure now that everything on the bill matches the menu. Exactly. He skims the bill and signs it with a smile of smug self-satisfaction, like a man who had just righted a major injustice, not just for himself but for every future guest in the hotel. He got exactly what he asked for, a bill that matched the menu, and it saved him 25 cents on the delivery fee. But he also paid 5 times that much extra for the increased service charge percentage, and best of all, in our hotel the service charges went right to the server's paycheck, which is straight to my paycheck as a tip. Edit, by the way, this was an American Airlines pilot. Their salaries average $86,000 per year, and this guy was in his late 40s, early 50s, so while not impossible, it is likely that he was on the entry-level end of the spectrum. They also don't have to pay for their own hotel room. All rooms are booked and paid for under the AA corporate account with the hotel, and the pilots and attendants get a per diem daily allowance for food and incidentals that is based on how many hours they are away from their home base. Edit number 2, also I'm a girl, so the 40 to 50-year-old man was screaming at a 22-year-old girl over the phone for what that's worth. And the next one is titled, Sorry About Your Strawberries. I work in a food distribution warehouse for a national grocery chain. My job is to drive an electric pallet jack with a 3-pallet capacity around and stack boxes onto them in such a way as they can survive being shipped. All of us who have been there longer than about 30 minutes have learned that in order to do this, we have to group the cases roughly by size in order to make a manageable load. This usually means that the cases from one aisle get scattered across all 3 pallets, and well, the stores had this great idea that they should be able to bring one pallet out onto the floor and have only the cases that go in that aisle on the pallet to make stocking easier. A couple of our higher-ups who had not set foot in the warehouse for more years than I've been working here had this delusion that if we would only finish one pallet before starting the next one, this request from the stores would be magically fulfilled. Now, they don't pay me enough to be actually able to shop in these stores, but somehow I doubt there is a pasta/canned corn/peanut butter/pudding aisle, which is one of the many fascinating combinations you get when you try to stack things that way. However, I digress. These higher-ups just recently passed down the finish the first pallet before starting the second idea as an official policy and claimed that reorganizing the warehouse was phase 2 to come at some undetermined date in the future. In the meantime, if we don't want a write-up, we have to follow the policy. I was working in the produce section of the warehouse a couple days ago and picked up an order that started with 2 thin, fragile layers of strawberries on the bottom of what was to be a 7-foot tall pallet. This could be interesting, I thought as I followed my headset's instructions to go to the next aisle. It was possible that the rest of the order could be light stuff like cut salads and mushrooms, so maybe things would be okay. I come around the corner and my headset directs me to the slot with the 36-pound cases of grapefruit and cheerfully tells me in her little computer voice, "Pick 30. Say again, I asked. Bravo 67, pick 30. Quantity? Maybe I had misheard. Quantity 30, pick 30. So, since the official policy was being strictly enforced, I took out my marker and a spare shipping label. I wrote, "Sorry about your strawberries," and put it on the pallet before dutifully stacking over 1,000 pounds of grapefruit on top of them. Then, because my headset is a malicious little person, she sent me to the 50-pound bags of carrots and tells me she wants 6 of those on top of everything else. Watching those little cases of strawberries crush into jam was a fine reward for heaving another 300 pounds of carrots up over my head to cube out the pallet. When they called me into the office today to discuss my stacking choices with the intent of writing me up for uncontained stupidity mishandling product, I simply called up my union steward and pointed out the new policy. "But the strawberries were ruined." Policy. Union steward shrugs. A 16-year-old stock girl almost hurt herself getting those bags of carrots down from the top of a 7-foot pallet. Policy. What about common sense? Where is it posted that an order worker's common sense trumps corporate policy? After so much hand-wringing and sputtering, my supervisor finally asked, "So, what was up with the note?" Me, I did not want them to take it personally. I am very curious to see how this new policy evolves in the coming days. And with this, we have reached the end of the video. However, if you cannot get enough of my content, please check out my endless playlist, where you can find thousands of hours of content. In addition, please don't forget to subscribe to my channel to not miss any of my daily uploads. Thank you so much in advance, and I hope to see you again tomorrow.